"Act as my bride," the Duke of Ostley said, sitting down beside the woman in black at the very end of the wedding table, "for 1 hour, and I will be in your debt as long as I live." She did not shriek or flutter or ask him to repeat himself, which he had rather feared. She finished the mouthful of syllabub she had been eating alone, laid down her spoon, and looked at him with gray eyes that had a great deal of tiredness in them and no fear at all. "You are the Duke," she said. "I am." "And you are drunk." "I have had half a glass of claret in 4 hours, and I am the soberest man in Kelmarsh at this moment, which is a low standard." Corin Ravensworth kept his voice under the noise of 200 wedding guests and did not look at her while he spoke, because 30 pairs of eyes were on the back of his head. "Madam, in something under 10 minutes Lord Draycott is going to rise to give the health of the bride and groom, and he is then going to beg the company's indulgence for a second happy announcement, and he is going to say that I have made an offer to his daughter." "Have you?" "I have not. I have never been alone with Miss Draycott in my life, except for 4 minutes in a conservatory into which she was sent by her father while I was looking at a fern. He holds a note of my late brother's for £900, and he has spent 3 months making it plain that the note may be forgiven, or it may be shown about. And last night he told me to my face that the announcement would be made today, in front of the county, and that I might contradict it if I wished, and that if I did contradict it, his daughter would be a girl publicly thrown over by a duke, and the whole shire would know whose word had been broken. The woman in black turned her glass by the stem. "He is quite right about that part," she said. "They would say she had been ruined, and they would not care whether it was true." "Yes. And she is 19. "She is 19, and she looked at me in that conservatory as if I were a dentist," said Corin. "She wants no more of this than I do. But if I stand up in this room and call her father a liar, she is finished. And if I sit still and let him speak, I am married by Michaelmas to a frightened child who despises me, for £900. There is only one thing in the world that stops a man announcing an engagement, madam, and that is an engagement announced first." At the head of the long table, under the swags of hothouse roses, Lord Draycott had begun to look at his watch and to pat his pockets for the paper he had written out that morning. "8 minutes," said Corin. "Why me?" she said. He risked one glance at her. She was perhaps 25. Her gown was black and had been dyed black, and had been a good gown once, 3 seasons ago, and had been let out at the seams and taken in again. Her hair was pinned very plainly, and a few strands had got loose at her temple. There was a mendied place at her cuff that had been mendied by somebody who could not afford thread of the right color. She had been put at the end of the table, below the curate, with an empty chair on either side of her, which in that country meant precisely one thing. "Because you are the only person in this room," he said, "who has not looked at me all afternoon as though I were an eligible property. Because you have had 2 hours of being ignored by 200 people, and have borne it without once looking pitiable, which is a form of courage I have some respect for. And because when Draycott sets his trap I shall need a woman with nerve. And I have been watching you eat a syllabub in front of 199 people who have decided not to speak to you, and I believe you have more nerve than any of them." Something moved at the corner of her mouth. It was not quite a smile. "6 minutes," she said. "What is it you propose exactly?" "That when he rises, I rise first. I will say that I have this morning had the great happiness of an acceptance from a lady who is present, and I will name you, and you will not faint or deny it. That is all. 1 hour and Draycott cannot speak, and Miss Draycott is not ruined, and nobody can accuse me of throwing a girl over because I shall never have had her." He turned his glass round. "Afterward we will find a way to be free of it that costs you nothing. You have my word." "Your word," she repeated, in the same breath as a public falsehood. "Yes," said Corin. "I am aware of the difficulty, and I have not the time to solve it." For a moment she said nothing. Then she drew a breath. "My name is Honoria Sparrow," she said. "Mrs. Sparrow. My husband was a naval lieutenant, and he was drowned off the Nore 2 years ago and left me 11 pounds and his sword. The bride's mother was my mother's cousin, and that is why I am here, in this gown, at this end of the table. In a fortnight, I am to go to my husband's brother's house in Lincolnshire, where I am to have my keep and no wages and the care of his wife's 4 sisters, because there is nowhere else on earth for me to go." She set the glass down. "Do you understand what you are asking? An hour from now I shall be the woman who caught a duke. Every soul in this county will look at me, and when it ends, they will say I was a scheming widow who threw her cap at a title and was found out. There is nothing left of me to spend, your grace. That gown is my last respectable thing, and my name is the other one." "I know it," said Corin. "I am asking anyway, because I have 3 minutes and no better hope. If you refuse me, I shall think no worse of you than I think of myself." Lord Draycott put both hands on the table and began to push back his chair. Honoria Sparrow stood up. She did it before he did. She stood up first, in her twice-dyed black gown at the wrong end of the table, and 200 people turned to look at her. And into the little silence she said, in a clear, steady voice that carried the whole length of the room, "Forgive me, my lord everyone, before anything else is said. I believe His Grace has something he wishes to tell the company, and I find I have not the patience to let him put it off any longer." Corin Ravensworth rose beside her, with his heart going like a horse. "I have this morning," he said, "received the greatest kindness of my life. Mrs. Sparrow has consented to be my wife." Afterward, he remembered the sound the room made, a single indrawn breath from 200 throats, and then a roar. He remembered the bride laughing and crying at once, and running the length of her own wedding breakfast to seize her mother's cousin's daughter by both hands. He remembered Draycott standing with a paper in his fist and his face the color of brick, and Miss Cecily Draycott, 19 years old, going white and then, unmistakably, sagging with relief and hiding it in her napkin. And he remembered Honoria's fingers, cold as stone, tightening on his sleeve, and her voice at his ear under the noise. "1 hour, you said. It has taken 4 minutes, and I am already a different woman." They had their arrangement out that evening, in the library at Kelmarsh, with the door open and a footman in the passage for propriety, because she insisted on both. 6 weeks, said Honoria. She had a sheet of paper and had made a list on it, which he found he liked very much. "Long enough that it is not a farce. At the end of 6 weeks I shall break it off myself, in writing and in company, and give as my reason that on reflection I cannot accustom myself to your position, that I am a naval widow of no family and wish to live quietly. That is a reason nobody can quarrel with, and it puts the whole of it on me." "Absolutely not." "It must be me, sir. If you break it, I am a woman a duke thought better of, and I shall not be received in a farmhouse. If I break it, I am an eccentric who did not know her luck, and eccentrics are forgiven." She wrote another line. "Second, you will pay Draycott's £900 within the month and get the note back and burn it, so that girl is out of his hand for good." "That was already my intention." Third, her pen stopped. "I will take no money from you. Not a shilling, not a gown, not a settlement, not a cottage afterward. If I am ever to be able to say I did this from decency, I must be able to say it with empty hands." Corin looked at her across the table, 25 years old, 11 pounds and a sword to her name, going to Lincolnshire in a fortnight to nurse 4 strangers for her keep, and understood that he had just been comprehensively outclassed in his own library. Mrs. Sparrow, he said, you have made an extremely poor bargain. I have made the only bargain of my life in which I was asked instead of told, said Honoria Sparrow. Sign it. The 6 weeks were the happiest of his life, which was not in the arrangement anywhere. She came to Ostley with a chaperone, his father's cousin Mrs. Bree, who was deaf, devout, and delighted, and she was installed in the East Rooms, and the county came to look at her in shoals. They came expecting a scheming widow. Corin watched, from the corner of his own drawing-room, what they found instead. Honoria Sparrow did not pretend to be anything. Asked her family, she said her father had been a schoolmaster at Wren and her husband a lieutenant, and that she had 11 pounds. Asked, with a sweetness that had a hook in it, whether she did not find Ostley very grand, she said that she found it very cold, and that the chimney in the yellow room drew backward, and she wondered that nobody had mentioned it to his grace. Asked by Lady Peveril whether she meant to make great changes, she said that she meant to make one, if his grace permitted, and produced from her work-bag a list of the estate's charity payments, which she had asked the steward to let her see. There are 41 widows on this list, she said to a drawing-room of 11 ladies, and every one of them is paid 2 shillings the week, whether she has a house or not, and whether she is 60 or 26. The old ones cannot live on it and the young ones cannot get free of it. If they were paid 5 shillings for 2 years and taught a trade, 7 of them could keep themselves for good, and it would cost the estate less inside 4 years. I have done the figures. They are on the 2nd sheet. There was a silence. Then old Lady Peveril put out her hand for the 2nd sheet, read it through her glass, and said, "Well, the young ones cannot get free of it. Nobody has said that in this room in 40 years. Give me a pen, girl." Corin went out onto the terrace and stood in the cold with his heart behaving very strangely. He took her to see the widows. That was the 3rd week. He had meant it as a courtesy, and it turned into 11 days of driving about his own estate in a dog-cart, discovering the property he had owned for 9 years, that the cottages at Fen End had no back door, that the schoolmistress at Ostley Parva had been teaching 34 scholars in a room built for 12, and had never once complained because she was afraid of losing the place, that a woman named Ruth Gorse could weave, and had asked 4 times for a loom. "You have been Duke 9 years," Honoria said, on the box beside him, on the road home in the dark. "I have. And I have spent them in London on committees, being told what my estate required by men who were paid to tell me. My brother was to have had all this. He was the one who liked land. He died at 31, and I got the title and the acres and a great many opinions about how a duke conducts himself, and I have conducted myself, and I have not been inside a cottage on my own ground since the year I came into it." He shook the reins. "I have been ashamed for 11 days. It is a very useful sensation, and I have not had it before." "It is not too late to be useful, sir." "Corin," he said. She did not answer for a moment. "That is not in the arrangement." "No," said Corin. "A great deal is not in the arrangement." The 5th week nearly finished them. Draycott, having had his 900 pounds and his note burned in front of him, took his revenge in the way such men do. He began to say, in tap-rooms and drawing-rooms, that the whole thing was a device, that the Duke had never courted the widow at all, that she had been picked up at a wedding table like a glove, and that there would be no marriage, and that anyone might see it who watched them together. It came back to Corin in 3 days, as such things do. He found her in the yellow room with the backward chimney, sitting with the list of 41 widows in her lap, not reading it. "They are saying it is false," she said. "They are. It is false." "Some of it," said Corin. Honoria looked up. "I'm going to say a great deal very badly," he said, "and you may hold me to the arrangement afterward if you choose, and I will keep it to the letter, and drive you wherever you wish to go. But I will not have another day of you sitting in a cold room believing that what has happened here in 5 weeks is a device." He came and stood where she could see him. "I asked you at that table because I was desperate, and you were brave. Everything since has been the reverse. I have been in the dog cart at 8 in the morning for 11 days because it was the hour you came down. I have learned the name of every widow on that list because you knew them, and I was ashamed not to. I have asked Mrs. Bree 11 questions in a week to which I already knew the answers, in order to keep her in the room, so that you could not be got at by anybody else. I am 9 and 30, and I have not felt like this since I was a boy. And I am aware that you have 3 weeks of my company, and no fortune, and no reason on earth to believe a word of it." Honoria Sparrow had gone very white. "On Thursday," she said, "I am to stand up in front of your county and release you." "Yes." "Because that was the bargain, and the bargain was the only honest thing in the whole business. And if I do not keep it, then everything Draycott says is true." "Yes," said Corin, and it cost him a good deal. "I know it. I have thought of nothing else for 3 days, so I am not going to ask you now before Thursday, because if I did, you could never afterward be certain that you had chosen it rather than been kept. Break it on Thursday exactly as you wrote it. Be free of me entirely. And then, when you are nobody's promised anything and can be got at by the whole world, Honoria, then I shall ask you, and you may say what you like." On Thursday, the long room at Ostley held 140 people, because word had gone round that something was to be said. She stood up in the twice-dyed black gown. She had refused every other, and she said, in the same clear voice she had used at the wedding table, "I have to tell you all something, and I would rather do it standing. 6 weeks ago, at Kelmarsh, the Duke of Ostley told this company that I had consented to be his wife. That was not true. It had been agreed between us 4 minutes before, at the foot of the table, to prevent an announcement being made that day which would have bound him to a girl of 19 who did not want him, and would have ruined her if he had refused it in public. He did it to save her. I did it because he asked me and because I thought it right, and I have taken not 1 shilling, not 1 gown, and no settlement, then or since. As the paper we both signed that night will show, it is on the table by the door and anyone may read it." Nobody in the room moved at all. "So I release him," said Honoria Sparrow, "here in front of you, and I hold him to nothing, and there is no engagement and there never was. Say what you like of me. I shall be gone in the morning. But you will not say that he trifled with any woman living, because he did not, and I will not have it said in my hearing." She sat down. Corin got to his feet, in a silence like the bottom of the sea. "That is all true," he said, "and it is the bravest thing any of you will ever see. Mrs. Sparrow, you are free of me, and I am free of you, and there is nothing whatever between us, which is precisely the condition in which I have waited 3 weeks to say this." He walked the length of the room, and stopped in front of her chair. "You have £11 and a lieutenant's sword and the best head for figures in this county, and you have refused everything I ever offered you," he said. "Marry me, not to save anybody, not for a bargain, there is no bargain left. You burned it in front of 140 witnesses. I love you, and I would rather be told no in this room than never have asked." Honoria Sparrow put her hands over her face for exactly 2 seconds. Then she took them down and stood up. "Yes," she said. Old Lady Peveril began the applause, and afterward maintained to her dying day that she had known the whole business from the first, which was a lie, and that she had personally arranged it, which was more of one. They were married at Ostley Parva in the small church by the school, 3 days after Christmas, by a curate who had once been seated above her at a wedding table. The bride wore grey, and carried nothing but a spray of winter jasmine cut from the wall of the yellow room. Within 2 years there were 9 looms at Fen End, and a new schoolroom for 34 scholars, and the widow's fund had been made over entirely, and was administered, on paper and in person, by the Duchess of Ostley, who was known through 3 counties as a woman it was useless to lie to, and who kept on her writing table, all her life, a signed sheet of paper listing 3 conditions, and a naval lieutenant's sword above the chimney that no longer drew backward. And every year on her wedding day her husband gave her a syllabub, and would explain to anybody who asked, at any length they liked, exactly why.